We're a couple minutes late. I was gonna wait for Michael to go live, but I figured I would jump on here and say hello. So, we'll go through the whole rigmarole of me setting this up, and then we will hopefully have Michael join us. So, hope you guys are all doing good. Uh-oh. Hold on here. Here we go. Can add Michael. Yay. Good. Hi. Good morning. Did you turn your camera
Good
off here?
morning. Well, accidentally, yeah. Seems
I
like there's got to be a way to go live without having my phone turned horizontal and then having to turn it the other way.
Yeah, there should be. There definitely should be.
Like
Oh,
the beginning of a live shouldn't be. Just as I try to get my phone situated every time.
I was watching this comedian talking, trying to describe uh minutes, how there used to only be a certain amount of minutes, on our cell plans,
Oh yeah,
It is pretty funny, to think about the wave of all of this technology. So who knows what it will be like eventually. So
crazy.
since I didn't do the reminder post, who knows who will find us this morning. But we have been on to much more important things lately.
Yes.
And I have some thoughts. What are your thoughts? Did you get to watch that video I sent you? The
The
7 minute.
one, the one of the ginger horse, or
Yes, that's the one. hmm
I don't know if I saw a 7 minute one.
It was a YouTube link.
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Okay. hmm What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, the connection
Hi, do you want
inside inside hind outside front is interesting in the hindquarter yield, because the hindquarter yield, I guess, thinking about it as forward and through, watching that makes me think I need more forward in a hindquarter yield, not just in a united arc, um, out of the inside or the outside front, in order for the inside hind to truly come forward. And so it becomes, say it again.
Yes, please. Good morning, Travis from Eastern Oregon. What's the weather out here? It is pouring down rain here. It's so gross. Oh my God. Good morning, Eva. I bet it's beautiful in Eastern Oregon. Say again
Okay,
what
so
you're talking about with the outside front foot.
outside front foot. I mean, that was the thing that stood out to me the most. Maybe that's not what you were
It is, but
thinking about. Yeah.
let's just talk
So
about it.
so inside hind, outside front, like going forward and around, that outside front really has to be going forward, right? Yeah. Okay. They get united. We're not drifting away. Good morning, Emily. I haven't seen you in ages.
How's
I
the
haven't seen you
baby?
on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, that is where where I think of the outside front coming forward and around without being contained by the outside rein. I mean, that's the whole, have them hooked onto the circle, have them hooked onto the leading rein before you're picking up that outside rein to where you're not containing it in doing the inside hind to outside front. The outside rein being more for talking to the hind legs, shaping the rectangle rather than containing the front of the horse, right? Clarity, not, you know, pretty obvious, right? Or not obvious, but like, yes, got it. Watching you do the hindquarter yield there and waiting for, like, shaping up it being more forward and through than where it started, um, is the degree to which you were waiting on the front foot to get forward and it to kind of almost be synced up with the inside hind, but that wasn't the goal. Sometimes it will. Just something I've observed for years. Just kind of taking note of, okay, it's been very disjointed. That's one thing I'll tell people to look for. It's going to get closer to being a diagonal pair
I
if
don't
it's
think
been,
really can. That's what I
yes,
was. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
yeah. So I mean, if it's just like ding ding ding, yeah, like they're not diagonalized at all, and it looks really stilted. Watch for it to begin to diagonalize, and it'll tell you like
If you
you're
want,
headed in the right. Huh?
if you want, I think that's
Yeah.
part of it, right? It's like you could do all sorts of things.
But if we're looking for a flowing hindquarter yield, that is one of the things that can help.
Mhm.
If you don't really know what you're looking for in terms of the whole horse, but you start seeing that shaping up, that's a little bit of a, okay, we're getting somewhere, right? We're headed in the right direction. Not necessarily that the end goal is diagonalizing that pair, but it it does help them to flow, like if the feet don't feel stuck to the ground. And I
Well, of
think
course.
for them to start diagonalizing, their feet start getting unstuck in order for them to diagonalize.
Yeah, you
So,
could think of of someone on the long lines, along the wall. Um, However, they decide to do it, going from walk to diagonalizing a step, and
mhm,
they're keeping the horse straight
yeah,
for the most part. I mean, but of course, when they start using like shoulder in, we're talking about generally the same mechanics of that. Emily says the baby's great, way easier than brother, but mornings are a bit more chaotic. Cinnamon rolls. Oh, did you make them from scratch or helping? We missed you on the show too.
yes, good to have you here.
We should tell the people a little bit what we're talking about, and then I'll the forward and through part. I don't know if we
Well,
need.
we can explain what we're talking about, but let me spit this out here now, and it might clarify what we're talking about. So, um, leaving the diagonalizing aside, that's just something was saying I've noticed in the past and do note and encourage people to maybe take notice of as well. But when you're working with that ginger, um, watching the outside front, um, like where it came together was not just something closer to being diagonalized, although that wasn't always the case, but watching the freedom of the outside front to go forward in order to have the inside hind free up and come forward and through.
You have to
Because
help.
really, I mean, where it started out, it wasn't forward or through. And then the other
No,
what was it? It
she
was
was
Rook too. You sent the video, and where she started, it was just definitely a wasn't quite a stutter step, but it was closer to a stutter step than forward and through. I mean, it was just real mincy and tight. So, um, I
barfy.
guess
Barfy is the word you're
barfly.
looking for.
That's not a word I use, but I suppose us talking, it'll eventually make its way into my vocabulary. Um, unfortunately. Uh, so I guess just the the dialing in of the front feet when you go to yield the hindquarter, i- it can't just be they've slowed the front end and the hindquarters you're gonna be like, well, duh.
That
Um,
no,
but I
but
think I dial in so much, like if a horse is not going through with the hind, because I'm thinking of another horse that Palomino that we were when you were here, um, where it's like she really is when saddled or upon saddling has
oh
a
yeah.
hard time letting go of that outside
Mm.
eye, which is just quite fascinating. because, side note, if you're bringing her around to saddle and she really wants to look to the outside as you're cinching up, so you're here and you're going, hang with me here. The more you keep her from looking at that outside stirrup, the more trouble she might have. But if, and actually, I came upon this by accident, she had kind of gotten to squirting and like drifting around a lot for Molly. And I'm like, whoa, 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 hold on. Like, this could go sideways really quick because she's already worried about it. If she moves quick, you can't hang on to the saddle. We dump the saddle now. I'm like, we got to interrupt this pattern of her just kind of drifting. And, you know, I took the horse and didn't want Molly to have the pressure of trying to execute this. And because I knew it would maybe take a lot and you got to stick with the saddle and all that. So um, she was drifting, drifting, drifting. And in order to block that, held onto the saddle, but backed her up, tipped the nose the other way, which is a little dicey considering she's doing it because she's tight. But I know, like, she understands how to move her own body, and I had to do something to interrupt the just as soon as she looked the other way in that four-quarter yield that I used to line her up, like, just
Mm.
completely turned loose. Her whole face, her neck, everything let go. And then
Looking
I
under
brought her
the
back. What's that?
looking under the bed.
Yeah,
Make
exactly. Like, oh, there's nothing there. And so then I brought her back and was cinching up. And it's not that she wasn't, still like apprehensive, but it was a totally different tone to it. So I'm going, I just don't want to be just kind of throwing out the like be on your outside shoulder, kind of stay in here while we're saddling. But as I was saddling, I was kind of going, okay, kind of keep your eye over here. But then I just, the saddle was at least now in place, still holding onto the latigo. If she jumped, I'd have it, but I wasn't really tightening it. And as I tightened it, I'm like, oh, just look back over there. Okay, come back over here and I'll tighten a bit. And then walk her forward, but then like tip her nose over there, like straighten her out, maybe not even rock her back, but say, look over there and come back. And it was just like kind of crazy how much the monsters under the bed were not monsters. So then we're going around. She'd get a little tight, and she doesn't like go into this completely mindless hogging around trying to rip the rope out of your hand, but certainly getting tight and crow hopping and just so I'd get her cornered enough to like kind of slow her down and then stop, back her in an arc. As soon as she saw that other side, just breathe out. It's just like, huh. And I came upon it by accident. I wouldn't have like that wouldn't have occurred to me to just it should have, because when I was riding her, I'd get through this like through a good bit of repetition. I get her to turn loose at the saddle and enough, and then I get on and ride. And initially, it was like swinging a leg over. It was another big like, oh crap. But as soon as I got on and allowed her to go forward rather than just the hindquarter yield, or it's like hindquarter yield, okay, now she's still kind of tight and she's going to walk off rather than keep her bent and get that moment of vulnerability on my part where she goes straight. But I knew I could bend her. So then I bend her the other way. And every time we'd switch eyes, she'd turn loose that much more. And then, so then I'd interject a few more steps forward in there, even though I was kind of looking for her to get stopped and settled. She was more settled in moving forward than she was in, me being on her back and not being able to look at the outside, whichever way I was going. Any case, we kind of jumped off into something else. But that mare, um, the more she'd kind of scramble and fight to look to the outside, because when she's doing that, the front feet are kind of running off on you because she's like she will, if you just like say, well, whatever, look to the outside, she's just immediately going to bow her ribs into you, shoulder into you, all of that. So in any case, I'd have to stop the front feet, which very much to get the hindquarters was you gotta stop the front feet. But watching the video of that chestnut mare, like getting from the front end has to slow and the hindquarters have to break over. So you're not just crow hopping or bulging your ridge into me to look to the outside stirrup because it's still upsetting you. Was as soon as you get the front end slowed, saying find that rhythm of even in the hindquarter yield, there has to be that front foot coming forward, 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 and around as the hind leg. And in order for the hind leg to step forward and through, which is, I think, what I saw when we were working on her when you were here in June, July, June, um,
July.
July. But I saw it again and saw it probably clearer with Ginger and the clips of Rook that you sent. So
So did it make sense what I was saying about um ultimately, like, let's say the hindquarters are going to the left. it it feels like when I like it, the forequarters are going to the right or going to the inside. So hindquarters to the left, forequarters to the right, or hindquarters to the
in
right,
in the
forequarters.
same movement almost. Yeah.
Absolutely. Here's the thing though,
Uh,
the
I'm sorry.
walking
Go ahead.
forward, well, the walking forward, like, very important because the horse, and you could see on both of those horses, at first they were like, huh? You know, because, but sitting up there, all I'm saying is sitting up there, allowing the front to go forward. But you saw how short my reins are. Like, it's like short, 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 and reaching really forward because as the horse is going to walk their hindquarters forward, then you're going to end up, more in a regular position, but you don't want to be pulling the front to the back,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So there has to be so much room in the front and allowing her, or your horse to drift, just I just mean, like, you could have a little bit of a leg yieldy. But really and truly, when I was sitting up there, it's more like just saying forward while not blocking. And you're saying forward, like, emphasizing the inside hind leg. So, of course, you can't be squashing them on the outside. But then as they start to figure it out, this is what it feels like to me. The outside front foot goes from going away to then going straight up and down, straight, more to just going up and down, and then even has the potential because even when the outside front foot, and let's say the wither, you can see the wither coming up, but the horse is also curved. So from the wither, to the ear. So then that's the potential. You could be like, then when you lead the front foot, it's just going to go forward. Now, more like forward and around into a volte or a small circle, obviously. Otherwise, you're going to have a change of direction completely with the hind feet because the hind
Hmm.
feet are coming forward. Then, if you were to continue the arc, it would be a volte or a pirouette
Yeah.
forward. In other words, forward with the hind feet. Um,
So when, well, let's just say this. I have had a couple specific students' horses lately where, and this is kind of across the board, um, when the horse starts thinking in the hindquarter yield, it's just out and away,
Mhm.
interjecting, not necessarily hindquarters, forequarters, change direction, sit back to say that front end, that front foot has to go here, making sure you have a connection to the inside front, forward, and just flowing one direction to the other. But then in that hindquarter yield, going hindquarters under, but front foot in And so it'd be like step of the hindquarters, forward and around, but forward reaching in, um, until the horse was, oh, okay, hindquarters under, but I have to be ready to go in. And pretty soon, then you can take multiple hindquarter steps, and the horse is not just like kind of disappearing with that shoulder, which legitimately, from the horse's perspective, that's what they thought was wanted, right? And they might, if they're an athletic little bugger, might be able to go from that and pretty quickly go over the outside hind and still bring the front end through beautifully. Not as seamlessly as they will when that front end kind of stays upright and underneath them. That's the tricky thing for someone feeling for and watching for the weight on the outside front. Sometimes moving to the outside helps the horse get to that outside front. Sometimes moving to the outside, when not, like, if you don't catch it, makes it like they might kind of be on that outside front, but they're really not. They're just, the shoulders are just flying away, and whatever front foot they're on is sort of irrelevant because the front end is not in the rectangle at all.
100%.
Um,
And
and then
that's
the horse begins to think that's the goal, right? So doing a hind quarter yield, bringing the front end to the inside, not necessarily forward and through, can kind of clear that up for the horse, um, which Stephanie, Steph 2 and I have had the discussion because it's always ringing in her ear. Buck saying, catch up the hind that's under it, the end that's underachieving rather than block the one that's not. And I'm like, well, this is different in this way, in this how. Um,
and she
I don't,
probably heard
I
him
don't,
talk about blocking the outside shoulder this last or this year, I would imagine, because he did talk about it this year.
and that's what we're describing there. Could
Mhm.
be either a block,
That's right.
just
Hi.
like a dead wall, a containing, or it can be, you know, a directing in the correct direction, right? So I was kind of saying, like, let's be careful not to just apply that so broadly, or amongst all the other things, we'll see Buck do or hear him say, like, that this trumps all, and like, you never, it's like, well, there's a lot of situations in which, yes, you're not going to block the end, but you can redirect and clarify what an end is supposed to do. So anyway, I feel like,
Super,
what's that?
super handy. This I like playing with both of those mares,
Hmm.
and also really novella. Except I have not zoomed in on it with her the same way yet, but using the same concepts, to fix up sideways away from the bend. So either in shoulders in or in a leg yield on a circle or leg yield along a straight line. We could say on a diagonal line, whatever. Um, so the feeling, exactly as you say, of being able to direct the inside front foot somewhere, then you really, so again, imagine you're going down the wall in shoulders in, left to right. Okay, so horse is bent to the left, you're traveling to the right. um the feeling of being able to step the left hind leg underneath, and if you wanted to lead the left front foot into the bend. Okay, again, then we have the horse in that moment that they are going both to the left and to the right, which, I've thought about that so much in the four-quarter yield, that the horse is both going, they are going in two different directions at once. And I've pondered that quite a bit and have never really found that. Maybe this sounds like a duh to some people, but I mean, honestly, I've never really found a way to think about that in a forward movement. But again, that is the feeling. So with that chestnut mare, really never having done a ton, like kind of not doing the sideways in super intelligent or intentionally in that development trajectory yet. And being like, all right, well, let's start, being able to do shoulders in. Or just think of it, you don't have to get too technical. It's just sideways, away from the bend, down the wall. But that will tell you right away if the horse is just running out the front of the rectangle with the outside front feet, with the shoulders. You could say with the shoulders. I would just say with the outside front foot. So again,
Mhm.
if you're going down the rail, left to right, if the right front foot is just off it goes, you know, and it's out of the rectangle, and the rectangle is not traveling like this, then we can. So if it's starting to open, like the shoulders are sucking to the wall, let's say, or really it's just willy-nilly, they're not really even going to the wall,
They're
but
just kind of they're almost in the way of the hind leg.
yeah, they're just not doing anything constructive. Again, the
Just
horse not.
just to add here, in this case, done what you're aiming at doing is not relying on the wall in any way to contain the front end. Just throw that out there.
Yes, it's
In
only.
case that was the idea someone was catching as we described doing it along the wall.
Yeah, it's just a guide for us to know where the hell we are in space.
Yeah.
um and I suppose the horse could learn to like keep their hindquarters on the wall, but I would definitely not recommend that. um But of course, and I'm not talking about a horse freaking out, escaping, not like, let's just imagine that the horse is 100% mentally and emotionally on board with this. They're just trying to sort out what they should do. Then how do we explain what to do? And this a little bit goes to the stuff too, comment or signing on to just one way of I do it like this. And she's very intelligent and thinking her way through all this, of course, but it's like, all right, yes, but what exactly are we trying to do? And then, like you said, in this 4/4 yield, uh or excuse me, in the walking up, we're going to have another name for it, because it's the second method of moving the hindquarters, kind of sorta, because you could
Well,
also say it's the first method. You could also say it's the third method, fourth method. You could also, who knows? But the intention being that you are walking the hindquarters forward underneath the forequarters as the forequarters are coming up. Okay, whatever. We're gonna have to name that something or other. Um, and
wait, and this is what you were doing with Rook and Ginger?
Mhm. Yeah, that was the goal. Yep.
So you were thinking of it as a while you're saying it's kind of all the methods.
Well,
But you're
wait.
thinking
What?
of it as something other than a hindquarter yield, strict and
Yeah.
true, whatever that is.
Well, but that's the thing. It's like, well, what is that? I mean, we're just, when we say we want to isolate the hindquarters from the front quarters, we want to, it's like, okay, well, that's the first thing you could be. You could be like, for instance, you could be drifting the horse around on a circle. Buck used to talk about that a million, years ago. But that does include the forequarters kind of heading off to the outside too,
Mhm.
just less, and then the idea being then you can break it all the way down into a hindquarter yield, which would be completely isolating the hindquarters from the front, and then you can send the front quarters around the hind, meaning isolating. Okay, but especially as you watch both of those videos, you can see the potential to do so many things, so many things. I mean, you could just do anything you want once the horse is that thinky in that posture. So when I was thinking for both of those girls, well, with Rook, like I really partially as a way to help her step longer and flowier across with her inside hind foot. But the only way that's going to work for Rook anyway is if it comes more, if her center of gravity moves more forward. Because otherwise, she's just rushing to catch herself with the outside hind leg. That's why it looks so stilted. She's not trying to be a stinker at all. It's just like, I got to cross and then catch myself, cross and then catch myself. So it's like, look, if you rearrange your body, then you could be, hypothetically, you could play with so many things, Michael. Think about it. You could have them pick up the inside hind leg, reach it forward and back without even touching the ground, right? Like a ballerina, like whoop, forward and back and forward and back, right? So the idea being that, and like you said, on the last one of them, with the last video I did with Rook, the last clip, meaning the last clip in time in her session, not the last one I sent you. So I sent them in reverse order, right? The left hind leg was reaching much more forward, and that's the one. Was it the left? I can't remember. Anyway, um, that one was very, very obvious. That was the hind foot, like reaching more forward. But then on the other side, it was like the arrangement of her body. And I wasn't going to continue to wait then for like a big long reach. And again, we're
Mhm.
talking about the low back. You can stretch those muscles longer and long. You can't necessarily do it on the first step, but after a few steps. But you can't even work on that if you have the whole front of the horse in the way, or resisting, or misunderstanding, or like all sorts of things. Again, just like a ballerina, we have to be organized in the front of the horse and turned loose. And Rook is such a great example, right? Because I'm telling you, her head just wiggles on her pole, which can work against her in the sense that then she can get, unsteady, right? She doesn't necessarily have enough tone all the time. You know what I mean? Versus, but man, and her jaw, you hear it. Sometimes she's moving it purposefully, and then other times it's just loose, which is great. It's great. I don't want to like be like, hey, clamp up. you know, oh, we just have to balance it ideally like a Jenga tower, you know.
So when you say two directions at once,
Which
what's
is the ultimate
interesting, which
separation of the hindquarters from the front.
okay, so four-quarter yield, you know, if you think about what feet are doing, inside hind is sliding back, outside front is not stepping behind anymore as it would in backing an arc. It's coming over the top. So there has to be a measure of balance that the one hind is sliding back. It is a backing maneuver, but there has to be enough room for the front end to come over the top. And that's not that step. Although the crazy thing is, it's paired up with the outside hind. So they're both going in the same footfall. If we're saying that outside front is going forward in the same footfall, one foot of the diagonal pair is going back and one is going forward.
In the four-quarter yield.
Mm-hmm.
And the hindquarters,
Because
again, the inside hind foot would be going one direction, and
in the outside front.
both front feet would be going the other direction. Well, I guess you could, nope, not necessarily, huh?
Yeah, because the both inside feet are reaching back.
hmm Yes, I would agree with that.
So so here we're talking a little bit more forward and back going two directions, although obviously it's also a lateral move. The front end is definitely moving
Well,
around. Okay. But when you're talking about shoulders in and this thing, whatever you're going to want to call it, that's basically, I don't know, I'm not sure why you're saying it's its own thing. And you're gonna be like, what the hell? Of course it is, because of the way you're thinking about it, but you're gonna have to walk me around to thinking about it how you're thinking about it, is basically just a high level of detail to a second method of moving the hindquarters that isn't just pick up a soft feel, step one hind, get the hind end active without it getting heavier on your hands. I mean, you're kind of saying, okay, let's take that into movement where it's
So,
it is very much a small rectangle to help them line up, um, but the two directions, if I'm understanding you, are inside hind going, let's say, left, and inside front going right.
both front feet having
Yeah, both
the
front feet, but
yeah,
inside front is maybe a little easier to picture and until you're good at,
yeah,
well,
yeah. I
it's
mean,
easier to see if you're just getting used to seeing it, right?
yes, also,
Seeing the outside forward come forward and around the inside front foot is a little less obvious to
but very
someone
important.
trying to get dialed in, but important, yes.
And the more the shorter the rectangle is, the more important that becomes. And then let's just say once again the left hind leg is going to the right. That was your example, yeah? But
Hmm.
you have the head of the horse, the skull, going to the left. The skull, the shoulder, and then of course it's all connected. So we'd have to really think about at
Wait,
which
say it
point.
again. I was trying to think of it the way everyone would see it as mirrored, but say it again because I got backwards on my lefts and rights.
Whatever. Let's just pick the left hind leg
Yeah,
coming forward and to the right, but not
yeah.
very I mean, I'm not talking about across the midline. Really, really, really forward.
Hmm.
And perhaps that's part of it. At which point does it go across to the right? And which point is it really just stepping forward? We could talk about that for sure.
Hmm.
um that maybe that's very important to say, no, 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 it is not going to the right, it is simply going forward, perhaps. But the feeling, like when I did that video for you guys, um I just did it for Michael and Nathan, by the way, so it's not like you guys are missing it. um
You
uh,
can hardly hear her, so
yeah. um
quality is pretty poor.
Not professional. But when I mentioned at the end was the feeling, like I said, that the left hind would be going slightly to the right, but the ears, the neck, and the shoulders are essentially curving and at least have the potential to go to the left.
Well, and so that's the thing. It almost is this blending
Hmm.
between forward and around
Hmm.
and a hindquarter yield, particularly if you think of a hindquarter yield as dialing into the moment of breakover where the front feet are slowing to the degree where there isn't any more advancement. Right?
Yeah,
That's how I know this is extremely crude, but it's how I help people start to um, conceptualize drifting, hindquarter yielding, breakover, all of that language is like over here, you have the front feet continuing on minimal influence in terms of their forward advancement. Whereas down the spectrum over here, you have the front foot completely stopping, which you don't want if you have multiple steps going and you're trying to. But for the breakover moment, the front end has to stop because it's going to change direction. So I talk about it as a bit of a continuum that the closer you get toward the moment of breakover, the front feet have slowed pretty substantially, but shouldn't just go from, oh, we're going forward to wham, and we just stop. There's got to be a drift into that. But something of what um, you're distinguishing from this whole spectrum is in the hindquarter yield, the hindquarters is doing more, but it's, call it still a hindquarter yield, or call it some like forward and around that has the hindquarters doing more. It's not. It is very distinctly, though it's maybe more over here on the continuum. It's not the front feet stopping for damn sure, but the front feet are continuing to be active. The hindquarters doing more, but the front end is also stepping to the inside to where it's almost has a forward and around element to the forward and through element of a hindquarter yield. But
Yeah.
I guess it depends on over here on the continuum, further away from this, the point where you'd be asking for a breakover, where the front end is staying a little bit more forward. How do we define that hindquarter yield or that drift? Like, do we want, you know,
Well, here's what
we don't want the shoulder escaping, right? We certainly aren't looking for that, where the shoulder is just kind of washed. But to what degree, like what is the front end doing in a hindquarter yield? And does it cease to be a hindquarter yield? Like, do we need a new name for it
we can
when
name it
you,
after Hans. That would be smart because it's his move. I mean, that's right. Like if I recall, that's what he was doing. Um, but here's the thing. This is what I would say. It, it's not on its way to a traditional hindquarter yield where you would be just about you would be slowing the front foot. This is I'm just saying is as I'm playing around with this and allowing just whatever to shape up, prioritizing peace and mobility and just feeling around for what's happening with some sort of idea of like I'm shaping it into XYZ, right? But definitely being open to whatever's happening. But here's the thing, my desire is that the front feet, I say feet, you guys, but I mean all the way up to the tippy top of the shoulders, the entire front leg.
and
Is,
the withers that are attached to it, the whole,
that's what I'm saying. You
yeah.
bet. All the way to the top of the wither. Um, that so yeah, that's not the leg. You're right. I mean everything on one side, from the foot to the very top of the wither. I would like more movement. It's not a slowing down. Other than the whole horse is getting united in terms of the amount of like the footfalls. But I would like more. So if you think of a horse, you guys have seen horses, like let's imagine a little white horse pushing itself backwards into lavad, or like they creep the hind legs maybe a little bit forward and then the front, but the front feet are not going less, they're just going up. Well, let's just, yeah, because they don't just jerk backwards into a lavad. They push themselves one foot at a time and then like a little rabbit or a little mouse.
And that's what's interesting because I've thought of the hindquarter yield as a slowing of the front feet in order to bring the hind leg closer to the front foot. But watching both of those mares, um, I don't know if one more than the other, but the combination of it and our conversation around it was the thing that stood out to me is in that application or in what you were asking of them there, the hind leg was coming forward more in having the front feet, front end continue forward more than I might have Like I might have been thinking, and this is probably what we were talking about with Willow in July, the Palomino mare, is like in order for that to flow and free up, the front end can't slow so much, right? Because then it just there's not anywhere for it to go. So the hindquarters being able to walk forward without running into something, particularly if there's any brace in the horse, which this lateral movement should be helping them to get lined up and loosen, there needs to potentially be, or not, let's probably leave out the word potentially, there needs to be enough movement or room in the way the front end is operating for the hindquarters to have a spot to step forward without running into a block, again because of tension in the horse or you know whatever, not
Or just
being lined up. I mean that really was okay. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say you could see that on both of those mares because
Yeah.
both of them, it was new to them. They're like, they just didn't know.
Mhm.
So the whole idea of like, hey, we're not stopping. Hey, we're not. On the chestnut mare, she was like, fifth method, or actually Brooke did that too. Like
Yeah.
they're just guessing a bunch of different
Yeah.
things, and it's like anyway. So not only blocking, but they're just like, what now?
Uh-huh. And that was another thing distinct from what we've been talking about when you're saying guessing. I think the shorter rectangle, and like you said, quite short, but hands forward enough for them to feel their space to search. But
And for the love of God, not down.
yeah,
Impossible if you're holding the nose down. Absolutely impossible.
yeah. Um, it's that shorter rectangle and up, as you say, it seemed like because you're allowing for like the way you're defining that rectangle still has room for forward, they're not feeling contained or boxed in, but there is uh, kind of
Well,
there's not
hopefully,
so many doors flung wide open that they aren't on the hunt for
that's my idea.
something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
is that I'm shepherding the front feet, the front leg, yeah, whatever, the front quarter up, which would mean both quarters have to go up, but the whole front end, you're just kind of like, got to give it the idea. It can't stop. We know that. I don't want it to go into the arc. I know that because,
What do you mean into the arc?
in other words, to the inside, let's say that hindquarters are going
Oh, sure. But
right.
you do want the front end to a degree to come into the arc. That's the multiple directions at once.
Well, yeah, but I really like, particularly, let's just say with these two girls, as I'm explaining this to them, they don't need to go. Yeah, you could, yes, you're right. Because sometimes I might be like, yeah, let's go, forward and around a little bit. The point, I guess, what I was trying to say is that the curve is so important to me because unless you're going to work in the long lines, unless you're going to work along the wall, or unless you're going to treat train, 100%, uh, w- helping with the guiding aids, you really, in my view, especially with these two body styles, let's just say, like, the curve is very important, that you're not trying to do this straight. Very difficult, I think. Very, 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 almost impossible. There has to be a little bit wiggling for this to work. But the thing is that my idea is that I am guiding or providing the idea to my idea is that I get the idea to my horse that the front end goes up, 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 so that the hind end can go forward, forward, forward. But but the whole horse is moving together. and that's part of the difference, I think, in like a hindquarter yield. Or let's just imagine second method of moving the hindquarters. You guys, that's a soft feel. In a soft feel, we don't. Although we don't want the front feet jammed into the ground, you just generally don't think of using that move. I mean, Buck says get creative with it, but let's just say the way we originally think of it is a horse is pretty, very, very still and can isolate the hindquarters without getting heavier on the reins. And I want my horse, like you saw me kind of hunting that, especially with Rook, like the ability from standing still to really and truly just understanding the inside front foot. But the way that, and that's why I was letting them move around additionally, other than just like not getting stuck, but really the idea that they could just come up in the front. Because wouldn't it be cool, just imagine this, like if you could use that way of shepherding them into movement, you really could end up stepping them kind of up into a lavad idea, which even if you're not trying to make it, as a high school movement, just the potential to do it, you can bend the hind leg, you can just relax the horse, all around the withers, you can, like, just the understanding of being able to do that. Additionally, couldn't you step the inside hind leg a little bit forward and then step right into, well, really, the inside hind leg could just make the first step of canter if you wanted to put it on a diagonal pair, right? So right hind leg forward, or a little tiny bit curved to the right. Then your diagonal pair would be the right hind and left front.
Mhm.
You could do it the other way too. You could step the right hind leg, or yeah, the right hind leg forward, and you know initiate the canter from the left hind leg. Either way, and I would be curious to play with that, whether the stability of the diagonal pair would be more beneficial, or the engagement and the ability to step forward. Then you'd have to play around with, can you step the inside leg forward to create a base? And then in the next moment, step the outside leg forward and with such engagement. I don't know. I'll have to think about that and play around with that a bit. But the point being, I mean, you could do whatever you want, hypothetically. If you,
And
because, and it's the an example, at least in theory, of a way to create total mobility and impulsion.
so
Well, to set
to
it up so that the horse can.
yeah, yeah. So the horse finds that spot of preparation, or I mean, engagement or life, the potential for power, right? You're setting them up to where they find the ultimate life, right? Now, so when you're describing this as distinct from the way, like you said, with like, at baseline, think about the second method of moving the hindquarters, which is like kind of get active with the hind. Don't be getting heavier in my hands. Like, doesn't even need to be maybe at the outset, or at various points. You might just go, well, just can you get active? Doesn't even have to be the hind leg stepping forward and through, right? If it's stingy, I was talking to, I think, Jody the other day on that. And it was like, yes, but right now, I would say hang in there and say, don't get any heavier in my hands, but we do need you to commit to going forward and through, because like that should be an easy ask. And if it's just this, oh, this is all you need, is just the get active, and there's never a forward and through element. In any case, um, at a certain point with your horse, if you've been working the four methods for a while, you, you want to be saying, can this truly go through the whole horse into a deep hindquarter yield step from a standstill? All of that. Any case,
And when we just have to, I want to clarify just one more time. If you are trying to shorten the rectangle, it is more forward. When we say deep, that's deep into the rectangle, not across to the other side of the rectangle. That's a really important point.
so to what degree, when you say forward and through,
Yeah, it's not the best explanation, honestly.
well, that's what I was just gonna say. To If forward means forward and through means across,
Mhm.
proportionally, what are we talking, right? So both those
Ultimate,
mares where you were starting, there was a measure of a cross,
it's
right? But not
ultimate.
really. I mean, it was almost,
Hmm.
it was like barely a cross. It was like in front of the other foot, but it didn't swing the ribs.
Feels like you're trying to help it get across when you're doing it, for sure.
Yeah. When
For
you're doing what?
when I was initiating it, I'm definitely thinking, okay, step your inside hind leg across, but also holding in my mind that the ultimate result would be actually nearly 100% forward. But
In what you're describing here,
again,
what we've
imagine
been
a
talking
horse
about.
in the long lens across along the wall. There's no across. In fact, realistically, the horse is going to have a wider base in the back if we're talking about a piaffe or levad. But this is not a narrower base.
Hmm.
And you don't want the horse wishy-washy on either side. The idea is that they, are so in the middle that so it ends up being. But I'm not thinking of like, don't move your inside hind leg across to the other side. I'm
Hmm.
not thinking that way, you know. But if you were to take the movement to the full extent, it would not be across at all.
What you're describing,
Hmm.
not a strictly speaking hindquarter yield, right? I mean, it's all getting kind of muddy.
Well,
Again,
but
you almost have to define measures of degrees or what each end is doing when you say hindquarter yield over against what you're describing here, because it is the hindquarter is doing more than the front, but the front is, has the feeling of coming around the inside more. And you're saying there's more forward than hind to the point where done correct, there's not really any going across. And, it's all getting, well, I apologize, guys, that she's not good at explaining this yet. She'll get better.
well, I'm just laughing because do you remember when because the words hind quarter yield are correct. Even if you want the inside hind leg to go 100% forward, it is still yielding off the leg in order to explain what you're talking about. Okay.
Yep.
And it's basically then a combination. The way you're kind of thinking of it is like, how can I draw the inside leg forward? And of course, you're going to start with forward and across, but marry that just a little bit with being able to pick the front foot up and bring it forward. And then you have some semblance of the inside of the horse just being able to step shorter, to have the rectangle adjust its center of gravity. I mean, it's from the horse's perspective, you are simply using a combination of a hindquarter yield and being able to bring the front forward, perhaps even yielding to the inside. Okay, you remember when our fellow students were like, "It's hindquarters. We're doing hindquarters for." I'm like, "You doing what with the hindquarters?" Which is where I started saying hindquarter yield, with which I got a ration of shit, you guys, for relabeling. I'm like,
I, I'm I'm
hindquarters, like
apparently very sloppy with my language there. I don't even
it's like the hindquarter.
like
That's
when you told me
a noun.
that, and even now I'm like, what does Buck say it? He says hind What does he say? In front quarters. He does
Says,
not say fore quarters. He says front quarters, right?
yeah, and he also says yield the front around the hind and the hind around the front. So it's okay to say yield the hind around the front, but it's not okay to say the movement as a hind quarter yield. He doesn't give me a bad time, just to be clear. He's never given me a bad time about it. But the idea of saying hindquarters as if it's both a noun and a verb, it's like fucking retarded. But I still love you guys, but you were being dumb as hell. And I had to just grind my teeth and suck it up and complain to Buck about it. At which point he just rolled his eyes and was just like, well, you just have to hang in there.
He's like, you're getting in the weeds. Who cares what they say? Who cares what you say?
He said that to me yesterday. I was like, no, I'm not. But even though it's like, yes, I am, but I want to be there because there's value in being there. Come on, you know.
So
Anyways, point being, we might have to adjust the
the
forward.
weeds don't help if you're only talking about the weeds, but if you're in the weeds, figuring out what else is in there that you wouldn't find if you weren't in the weeds, there's a lot that can be gained being in the freaking weeds.
You're trying to find your ball in the weeds. Yes, you guys, somebody please write that down. Hmm. Or we could just try to mark it. 61 minutes in. Uh, yes, Michael. Yes. So forward and across, it's like, yes, you want to have the mobility to move it forward and across. And of course, here's the thing, if we are talking about muscles being long or short, lengthening a muscle so that it can reach more straight forward. Well, we can lengthen that muscle a few different ways. We can bring the inside hind leg forward and across. We could also bring the inside leg behind, reaching behind in a hind quarter yield. Of course, you could do it in a backing circle too, in a
Wait,
four
say
quarter
that
yield. So,
again.
sorry, in a four quarter yield.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so if we're talking about, because ultimately, what are we saying? Of course, we want the horse mentally and emotionally turned loose, which they should be if we are giving them a payout for partnering with us. Then they should be mentally, emotionally on board. And if we don't confuse them, okay, so all of those things, let's just say, being a given, then we are talking about gymnasticizing the horse. Okay, what does that mean? And in my view, that means freeing up and getting stronger. So then, when we think about that, then we're talking about how do we lengthen the muscles in the horse? In other words, stretch them out. That doesn't just mean stretching the top line, putting the nose on the ground, has nothing to do. I mean, okay, that's really, in my view, that's not how you stretch a horse. In my view, at this current moment, allowing them to use their whole range of motion comes from all the, I think there's a lot of extraordinary dressage riders that would agree with that. Um, but anyway, in the simplest way of like, what is our goal? What is our aim? Well, that is it. So then we have to have a way of moving the limbs so that we stretch the muscles a little bit. Just you guys think about just stretching yourself. Stretch like a ballerina, stretch like a yoga practitioner, whatever. Stretch like it doesn't matter. We're stretching. And then then we have weight bearing exercise in dressage. That's how we do it. There should be some element of jumping. They all say that, right? Or going up and down action of, but you're still weight bearing, right? You still weight bearing, then expressing that engagement, and then re-engaging. Okay, this is the same. Whether you use an obstacle, a cow, to have your horse sit down more and stretch its front feet, whatever. It just doesn't matter. I'm going to tie off to a cow or a log or something, and then I'm going to drag it. Okay, well, what are we trying to do? This is weird, other than doing a job, you know. Anyway, that's very important in my view to understand, like, well, what's the goal here? And then what's the point of gymnasticizing our horse? Obviously we'll be able to do more, but this physically healthy and a fun project. And of course, like you and I were talking about earlier this week, Michael, is one has to have quite a level of cooperation and becoming physically, mentally, emotionally one thing in order to talk about such intricate details. Debbie and I, Joanne, good morning. Debbie and I were talking yesterday, about that chestnut mare having such a tight neck, which, by the way, Revlon, the little Mustang, not little, but the young Mustang, um, some days she can have super rock hard muscles in her neck, and then on the same day, she can turn them all loose. But we were talking about the difference between the horse. We could say the animal, because I'll tell you what, it's very interesting to look at the mule's neck as well. But let's just take a horse. They have to inflate their neck themselves, right? Like, the chemistry has to become such, the mind has to become such that the blood can start flowing through and inflate the neck. The muscles have to turn loose, right? So no amount of massaging it is going to achieve the same thing as the heart starting to and everything starting to turn loose. I mentioned this to Debbie yesterday. What As I'm just feeling around, having the best time, by the way. The rib cage, the top of the rib cage, right behind the withers, turning loose, you know is like, you can kind of feel it going, and then all of a sudden it'll go like this, and of course that's when you end up with blowing and a desire to stretch too. So to me, there's an element of, like, if we're always walking our horse around, like, in an engaged posture, like, I crave, and I would say empathetically crave, and that's what we would see more in a competition style warm blood. Like, that's the impression that I get, or when I ride those type of horses, or let's even say I could ride Zorro either way, you know and I love that feeling. And like I said, maybe it's just empathy, or a cathartic, sharing a cathartic moment. But when the ribs, like, I would imagine the muscles along the top of the ribs, right behind the withers, turn loose, and then the wither like that. And so I'm just saying, the flow, everyone talks about the flow of energy throughout the whole earth. Well, okay, well, what are we talking about? We're talking about some physiological components. We can just make it very, very simple. That the heart needs to pump the blood through the body, and not at a rapid rate that's running into tight muscles. Like, the whole horse is like, that's not what we're talking about. We have to have a turning loose, but also, and this is where, when I say, fuck it, I'm just gonna ride her like a dressage horse. Well, to me, I've been thinking, like, what does that mean? What the hell does that mean? And there's an element of that to me. Like, after you've done some sprints, you know you're I'm just saying, for myself, after I have done sprints as a human being on a treadmill, let's say, to an all out to a walking recovery, and an all, let's say, a 30-second all out. You guys all can try this, on the road, or the treadmill, if you haven't done it, and then a walking recovery. And pretty soon, your hip flexors are going to just automatically start to stretch. Your lungs will turn loose. Not if you go, I mean, you're going to collapse. And also, you're not ever going to go all out if you don't believe in the recovery. You will be conserving, conserving, conserving out of survival. But if you believe that you can touch gold and come back and relax and touch gold and it come and will pretty soon you can get farther and farther and farther. So anyway, enough of that other than touching a horse physiologically. Anyone could touch the horse's neck and be like, yeah, that does feel like a rock. Maybe there's something wrong with her. Blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe, probably not, but maybe. And then what does it feel like? And this is where I just go back to, I don't know how to get around, not that I have any desire to get around it, but the fact that the horse needs to be moving their own body. They have to be in charge of all of that. That was a lot of talking, sorry guys. What
That
are your,
was.
yeah, sorry. Interpret for
um,
the please.
well, yeah, I don't know if I can, but what, describe. You said you could do either with Zorro, and I think it is that because he is so obedient, so trained, you can kind of just set it up, ask, and he'll do it. But you can do that basically without that, like letting him fill the space. I mean, would draw the distinction of what you meant there.
Well, and I'd have to talk to Wendy about if I'm saying it right. But like, let's say I turn him loose, which I've done over the last few days up in the arena, so he can kind of run around and roll and stuff. And he will prefer to trot, and he will trot in more like a French style or class. Some people would say classically trained Baroque style, a Bochet style trot, where he engages his stabilizer muscles. The head comes up, and he's very much like this. Like you could just see certain things are turned on. He looks very stable across his back, neck a little bit more engaged than what I crave, you know, and that's how he was trained. And of course, it was total sacrilege when I got the horse. And thank God Wendy is so lighthearted about it. And I was like, because I wanted him to turn loose around that area in the rib cage. I wasn't able to describe it like that. I kept talking about the base of the neck in front of the withers, right? But there's also, now that I think about it and I'm feeling around more, there's a place right behind the withers, and it is the ribs for sure. Um, that I wanted to turn back. And of course, he would hold a little bit of tension in his lower back, which of course, if you want the whole horse to stabilize in the way that they are thinking about it or focusing on it, like it makes sense that you would want the whole horse to just kind of hold together. And of course, and he's bred that way also, right? So he comes with a body style that does that.
Very packaged.
Yes, yes. And you can see, and the front legs will just have so much more up and down action as a result. You stabilize the body, withers to hindquarter, to the tail, and then the front leg action can is extravagant, right? But the way that I have ridden him has included a longer frame at times, and then I personally like that better when it gets put together, but it is much more of a bow than flat, wither to tail. Flat is sort of a rude way of saying it, because that sounds deflated. I'm not talking about it, but the way,
Horizontal.
yes, very horizontal. Where I would like, I'm just saying for my, and I've been thinking about this a lot too as we listen to Philippe Carl and Carl Hester, and you read books from everybody's perspective. you got to kind of think, well, there's positive muscles and negative muscles, and then you have stabilizer muscles and flexibility muscles, and it's like, whoa, what are we deciding we want here? And side note, I keep looking at Hope. So you guys, I have a really pretty nice little cutting bred mare, Gray Starlight. Um, and I haven't done a lot with her. She's like 6. She was started and um by a nice lady that I bought her from. But so I've really just watched her. And I watch her move around. I tell you what, like I was saying yesterday, she just maneuvers around with her hind legs. Their front feet don't do much. So they just get out of the way. But the way that she's built, I don't know that I envision. You've seen Rook, so I have another quarter horse, you guys, who is more reining style cutting bred looking. The bay mare, much more square, not square like Katniss, except for Rook's front and hind legs are farther apart. Um, like her front quarters and her hind quarters are farther apart than Katniss, but they're very square like that. But like Rook, for instance, no problem to to change. Like it's no problem for her. You see that? It's pretty wild. Well, see, her canters are a little bit harder, but I think she's pretty emotional about that. So like this, but I don't envision desiring to do that with Hope. Not
Desiring to do what?
to to change her shape that way. I To create this bow, this engaged ballerina style posture. It's almost like just let her be as best I can on a loose rein, keeping everything loose because all her feet are loose. There's no bullshit in there. So any if now if you put a saddle on her and that happens, if you touch the reins and that happens, okay, that's a result of mental emotional, right? But there's nothing physically at her age right now that looks like it needs to be turned loose. Perhaps strengthened, but probably not really. I don't look at her and be like, "Oh, if I gymnasticize this horse, then it's going to look like this." It's like, really? Because she does everything off of her hindquarters anyway, but it's not up very much.
Hmm.
I don't know. This is the first one that I will have ever ridden, I mean, trained that is built like that. But it is kind of interesting. Look at, and the mule in the same way, looking at her back, like her back is an exaggerated version of Zorro's back. And I don't know that it has the potential to move in the same way that Zorro's
So,
does. Now, I would crave maybe a little bit of opening of the withers and like right behind the withers so that she can round her top line so she's not going around like this. Like Hope doesn't do that, she just, but it's not like her Hope, the quarter horse, the cutting bred Gray Starlet, she doesn't have to do this to access the rest of her body. That's the thing.
mm,
If I could just keep the withers just open and loose, then I think the way that her head moves or the way that her body stabilizes her head, it just don't have to do much. Versus Feather doesn't really look like you have to help her with her balance across the ground, but she can either be looking up and doing stuff with disengaged or not. Again, this is where it comes
yeah.
to
Interesting. I'd be super interested for you to start writing Hope then, 'cause that's
the more I watch her, but it's been fascinating just to watch and think for sure. Very interesting, particularly riding the chestnut mare, the bay mare, both quarter horses, you guys, and then having ridden the marshmallow. I don't know how much I'll be riding him. But that was a very different body style. But I would say like the chestnut mare is very, very well bred. the bay mare is talented for, or is not badly bred, you know, but her, I don't know, her ability to flex things is cool, you know. Anyway, yeah, I don't know, because I just don't crave that, the dressage shape, when I look at Hope.
Peculiar.
Peculiars, right? Hmm. Okay, well, you talk for the last few
That we
minutes because that's talking for me. Sorry.
um yeah, I'm kind of interested to hear more about that one over time when you get to her. Um, I would say go back and maybe not. Like early on, you're like, let's tell the people what we're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, but hold on, I have this thing to say. Go back and summarize or lay the. Maybe it's not worth it at this point. Hopefully, they caught on as we went on. But um, yeah, how do we, you and I together, go back and summarize or like lay the base of what we launched into there? Anybody have any comments on it? Let's say that. Does anybody have questions on what
Or
we were
thoughts. Yeah,
or
the,
thoughts? Yeah.
and remember, you guys, we're not talking about right and wrong here. There comes a point where it's like, okay, now that we can talk to our horses, what do we want to talk about? Right?
Yeah.
And then that's on you. Whatever you
And
decide.
it's about having um well, in the case of both of those mares, having another resource that you think there's been there all along, but having a new way of thinking about it or describing it to a person or kind of setting it up and more with the horse more than anything, imagining it, waiting for them to happen upon it, having it be a little clearer in your mind as an additional kind of don't like the term, but tool in the toolbox to say, okay, just a little bit more of this like this in this moment of your understanding, like search around right here for something that's a little different than you might have prior to the other day had in your super conscious mind what you were looking for, such that you were maybe doing it but weren't even aware of the nuance of that over another thing. So yeah, not necessarily this is the way to do it, whatever it is, it's another detail that we found in the weeds in terms of a way to conceptualize it, think about it, something to ask of your horse in a way that this might help parts get arranged, adding this to the mix. Mm. Yeah, I'm excited to play with it. Interesting bit riding Rooster the other day. Um, we were kind of weight to the outside, forward and around, and kind of trying to think about really opening the shoulders in the weight to the outside. So adding more of a more than just a leg yielding feel, like we're really going to get broad across the ground and then go forward and around. And particularly going left, it was like this just isn't broadening like I'm looking for. And I was thinking, just like we were talking here, and like I said, I talked to Stephanie about when the shoulder was kind of doing too much of, don't lose the inside front foot, which going left, there are times where it'll be like, it's just not there, and I'll have to back up and hit on that a little bit. You saw that at the canter, but um, doing that leg yield waiting for it to broaden. It's like I'm losing the hindquarters now and trying to like he's not finding that that round feeling going left as much as he is going right. Like it's coming together. So I tried doing shoulders in, same movement, different trajectory, no longer on an arc, and it was just like the whole thing stacked up, and off we went forward and around. Um, so that was interesting to me, and I don't know quite why that would be.
Shoulders in along the wall.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe you have thoughts as to
Well,
why that works so much differently because and I think it was like you say, when I said, keeping in mind the wall is not containing the horse, it's just a reference point. I think it was that reference point because as I was doing it, I was saying your front end needs to, whether we're talking 2 or 3 track doesn't matter. I mean 3 or 4 track is like the shoulder cannot be swinging out there. I want you to broaden the shoulders, open up the shoulders, but I was almost opening my inside rein saying, "Leave this foot here
that's right.
while that foot reaches," right?
That's correct. And
And
that's it.
that and
Mm.
that's what he needed going left in order for his withers to truly open. But I'll be super interested to, just have in mind um, what you were showing with the 2 mirrors, because I think he'll be right on to that, and I think that's also gonna help, like I said, um, with the Palomino mare, Molly's Palomino mare. Um, just thinking about how much forward in the outside front would be helpful. Because I probably too much have thought slow the front end or not slow the front end, but have the hind end catch up to the front by having the front end not move as long a stride across the ground, which is probably still what's happening. But I think I was retarding it a bit too much, even without having a backing up feel or a pulling back feel. There has to be a bit more of an encouragement almost of the front end to continue forward
And
as
all
you're
you do is
as you're
change.
having the hind end step forward.
Yeah,
And
you
what?
just. Yep, you're not taking any of the stride away, in my opinion. You're just directing it up instead of out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to who was I saying lately? Like you have the footfalls. Don't think about the footfalls. Don't think about where the feet are landing on the ground. You're thinking too much about that at the exclusion of what that's supposed to be doing through the whole horse. So yes, you have to be making being aware of are the feet doing what I want and what information does that give me as to what the whole picture is doing. But you have to not be stuck there doing this, going, it's not quite right, or it's just like some of what's going to get it right is by capturing and by looking at the overall picture and going that's headed in the right direction. And like I said, with the diagonalizing the outside front and the inside hind on a hindquarter yield, it's not like the goal is to diagonalize them. Like that might be what you're feeling for, okay? But when it's been kind of choppy and those start to free up and move closer to being together, that's a cheat almost to go, well, I'm not looking at the whole horse, but something is freeing up based on how the feet are,
Yep.
where the feet are landing and the timing in which they're moving. But you can, like, I honestly don't look for that diagonalizing a lot. I'm looking more at the entire horse. Um, so that's kind of like, well, here's another thing to notice in the footfalls and the timing of the footfalls. But you still have to look up, and it's not just the feet are placing where I want them. It's what is it doing through the whole horse. Um, that I think um, is important to remember when you're getting going with this and still thinking about mechanics and footfalls is like, don't stick on that as your only target for
I
too
wonder
long.
if perhaps one of the simplest things to help some people, I know it was very helpful to me, albeit a very long time ago, but like there's a lot to think about. Way more than what typically gets talked about. And that's important to know because
Unless you crawl in the weeds.
that's right. Also, so I don't want we're gotta wrap up. Oh, I want to read Corey's comment, but one foot being the antagonist to the other is very important. All 4 feet are doing something. You're not just randomly doing, even if your focus is this foot, then other things are happening here. The
Mhm.
horse is whole, just like we're supposed to be whole. Corey says, I need to review this episode and think through the technical details, but it's been interesting to hear you discuss it. To see these things on video would be super helpful. Yeah, Corey is studying her little butt off, so it makes sense that it would make sense to you, Corey, following along here. Yeah, I think even this is my supposition though. In some ways, it might even be more valuable to not see a video. In some ways, just because then that will force you not to look at anything specific. Because Michael and Nathan and I have had a lot of discussions about what, and particularly you, Michael, right away. It's like, oh, I see this, what's happening? And then I get to add, yeah, this is what I was thinking about, or this is what I was feeling for, or this is something that happened that you can't see on the video.
So
So it's like the video is going to be, yes, helpful, but perhaps minimally.
what because at at a certain point, I think it was more watching Rook that I said, and you referenced it, the one side, the step was deeper there. The other side, you just felt it getting lined up. And I was thinking, and I think I maybe said it before you even said that's what I was feeling for, is your the step wasn't yet deep enough, but the horse is getting lined up to the point where it was inevitable, maybe not that time or even the next, but the inevitability of the result was shaping up based on the way the horse was thinking, moving. Um, and so, particularly, that hindquarter is going left to right. To have held in there and waited for it to look or feel like the other side would have been releasing far too late because it was already inevitable, even if it wasn't going to happen that time or even the next time. But like it was shaping up to just fall out that way.
And
And
trying to just give the
if
idea.
you get too focused on this is what the feet are supposed to do,
That's fair.
that you're not just kind of searching around, which I guess that's a good place to finish it because we are talking about feet and lift and like there's so many things you can be latching on to, whether you watch a video or hear the conversation or are doing it with your own horse thinking, this is what I can feel or can see, like not getting too focused in on I mean, you kind of have to focus on what you can feel and see, but also reaching beyond that. And that's where the conversation is potentially more helpful in a way, because watching it, you're going to latch on to maybe one or two pieces, but talking about it, even though it's kind of like, wow, what? Maybe a bit, it gives you a lot of little things to imagine and search around for, feel for, and you might happen upon something kind of interesting without getting too honed in on this is the answer. Right? This is what made that work. This is the goal. Like, well, there's a lot of goals in there.
That's right.
Uh,
That's exactly right. And one thing that occurs to me is trust your, like, if it feels good to you, it probably has a lot of value and ultimately fits in to the big goal. Yeah, I would want people to feel that way. For if you don't even know like how to be safe and like nothing feels good. Okay, but a lot of our friends are plenty far down the path. Be like, okay, what is it that feels good to you? Because probably that feels good to your horse too. Caveats to that, of course, and things you just can't feel if you don't know how to help the horse get there, for sure. But, if you're like, oh, because I do that, you guys. Oh, that feels so good. I don't know for sure why. And then my horse, like, you're like, okay, something here is better. And some of these things I know very, 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 very well. And other of these things, it's like, there's things that I might not be able to put my finger on. Corey says sometimes when you're saying which foot is going which way, it's like when Google Maps says go east. Okay, my brain is trying to catch up to create a visual in my mind. Yeah, it's hard. It- Yeah. And probably the reason I can even sort of do it at all for you guys is from all those years of being on the phone with Michael.
well, and the years of not, be, I don't know, don't want to say it, but not being in the weeds too much. I mean, even though we were talking about it, we weren't talking in the weeds like we are in recent years. Like the weeds were not near as, I don't know. The weeds is really kind of a weird word, but
It's not good. I mean,
it's not.
it's good in the sense
But
of
if
like,
you're looking, like if you think about clearing the weeds, looking for something of value in there that you didn't know was there, like I don't know, I get all kinds of I do enjoy walking the forest and we got all kinds of invasives that we're pulling through and sometimes even the DNR is like you just got to spray the hell out of it and take care of the invasives. And I'm like, oh. So I've been like selectively doing that and I've had help doing it. But you go out there and you're like, see if I sprayed this like little oak tree would not be here. So like let's protect this oak tree. So you're in the weeds and you're going, oh, but look at this. Like if we can just like foster this and clear the weeds around this. And so maybe the weeds works as long as we describe the picture a little bit more.
oh, it does work. It's just you have to have a lot of other data. And I change the meaning based on the context too. That's the other thing. There's lots of good words that are like that.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Well, who was the funny comedian was like he had a bunch of different examples. Like you're a little shit versus that is the shit
Yes.
versus
I've seen a meme that has that.
a
I think
bunch
I
of
I
shit.
think I might have sent it to someone. I'll see if I can find it again.
Grab your shit. I'm in the shit. You know, like, why they're always cuss words that are so because they're a feeling, that encompasses a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
So we can use the weeds the same way. Yeah. Okay. Well, good times.
Fun conversation.
Mm-hmm. All
Till
right.
next week.
Yeah, well, you guys are gonna have to share this episode if you want your friends to see it, because I'm behind on publishing, producing, finishing my production, because I'm working on a bunch of other things. Oh my gosh, I was telling Corey this morning, I wrote a list of movements and transitions. Like they're two separate lists. A list of movements and a list of transitions. They're fucking long. That's why people are lost all the time. I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of a long list. So anyway,
Yeah, it's interesting how much it can be like. There's really not that much to it in terms of like if you're just looking for the basic. I can walk, trot, lope, and make transitions between the two, and that's like, or throw in leg yield, throw in whatever. Like, okay, I can kind of pilot my horse around. Like that, that's pretty straightforward. What else is? But when you're talking the quality or naming each of those transitions, um, and getting pretty detailed in the movements, like we just talked about, more than just hindquarter yield, the 4 or 5 methods of moving the hindquarter yield, and like the list gets long pretty quickly when you parse it all out.
long. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. All right, you guys. Well, Michael and I will be back here next Thursday morning at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
8:30 Central.
Have a good week, you guys. See you
Bye.
later.